You know, every now and then I tell you that I got these stories from my past that make me cringe, and it hurts my heart and my brain to even remember them. And what makes it even worse is that we've been doing this together long enough. I'm like, did I tell him that horribly embarrassing thing about myself yet or not? Well, now it's going down twice, so here we go. Hopefully my recollections are the same from the last time I told you, if I did. One time when I was a kid, I was appointed to oversee my younger two siblings at our house in Fort Collins, Colorado. My parents went and did something. And my brother slammed his hand in a big, heavy sliding glass door. I don't remember how it happened. I don't think it was anything malicious. It happened. And it was ugly. It was pretty bad. But I had already gathered some coins that I had been saving up, and I intended to go down to the local King Soopers. That's the grocery store there in Colorado. And I was going to get some gum and some different treats. And I really wanted to do it. And I was like, well, that looks bad, but I'll get him some gum too. And that's how I justified it. And so I went down to King Soopers and I got some gum and I came back. And in the interim, my parents had come home and my sister had empathetically and far beyond her age or wisdom or years or responsibility level had seen the situation, was like, something has to be done. That kid is like bleeding out from a devastating thumb injury. And she took care of him and tended to his needs, and I didn't. And I showed back up with gum and walked in. I'm like, I got it, buddy. And then my parents are there, and I'm like, oh. And sure enough, they were not impressed. While they were pleased that I had generously decided to use a little bit of my money to share gum with my brother, they felt that the larger concern, in their parental estimation, was that he had smashed his hand and probably needed stitches at the hospital, and I hadn't done anything about that at all. Likewise, in Matthew chapter 23, the fourth of 7 woes that Jesus pronounces against the religious leaders, the teachers of the law, the Pharisees, that demonstrates that they are hypocritical. That's the thesis of the whole thing. Y'all are hypocrites. Now here are 7 woes. Each of these is a different pillar supporting my assertion that you are hypocrites. So this is the 4th example of that. In this particular example, Jesus' accusation against them is the same as my parents' accusation against me with the thumb incident of 1980, whatever that was, which is a nice job on the little thing, I guess, but I sort of don't care at all because you missed the entire point of everything you were supposed to do and be in this situation. Matthew 23:23. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You give 1/10 of your spices, mint, dill, and cumin, but you've neglected the more important matters of the law, justice, mercy, and faithfulness. You should have practiced the latter without neglecting the former. You blind guides, you strain out a gnat, but swallow a camel. First of all, what we see here is that Jesus never says like, oh, don't give 1/10 of your spices, something that you cultivate and that has value. But God provides the sun and the soil and the seed and the water and the design to make it all work. Like, yeah, you got to give some of that back to God. There's the basic principle throughout the Bible of what it is. If you're a kingdom citizen, you view your possessions as belonging to God. And we haven't come to a lot of passages that really spell that out yet in Matthew, but it's all over the place. And this idea of giving 1/10 of your spices, it's Bible-y. Leviticus 27. Got to be careful with Leviticus. You don't want to just start like reading things out loud. You want to look real carefully, or you're going to accidentally blurt out a bunch of stuff about unclean emissions. Leviticus 27:30, this one's clean. A tithe of everything from the land, whether grain from the soil or fruit from the trees, belongs to the Lord. It is holy to the Lord. So these guys were doing a good job on that thing. But if you read through all the books of the law, the Torah, the first 5 books of the Old Testament, and you come away from that like, you know how to tell if somebody is really getting it right and they're like really on board with the whole God thing and they really want to please him, it is if they cut off 10% of all of their dill plants and then donate it to church. That's how you know. No, it's like 10 degrees, 10 categories down the line. If you read all of its context, there's a whole bunch of other stuff that you want to get right that's indicative of bending the knee to God. And just one of the ways that that would manifest and be evident would be way down the line here to be like, oh, well, you know, if I have this stuff, God's ultimately the owner of my stuff as a logical consequence of all the other things that are much more clear that I believe in him into. And so this just makes sense then for me to give this to God. Okay, cool. Sounds great. So Jesus doesn't rescind that. He doesn't ever come back and be like, you idiots, you shouldn't be donating spices. That's dumb. He's intentionally picking something that is good, ordained even. It's important, but that certainly isn't central. And certainly if you could only get one of two things right, and that was one of them, and the other one was like be into justice, mercy, and faithfulness, we'd want to go with the justice, mercy, and faithfulness thing. So it was nice of me to get gum for my brother. I mean, my parents at no point were like, don't be generous with your brother. Don't give him gum anymore. We don't want you doing that stuff. No, they were like, that's great. Like, obviously you guys should share. Being generous, that's important and good. But do you remember when his thumb was falling off and he lost his nail and there was blood everywhere? Like that was the bigger priority more than the gum. But you can still do gum later if you want to. So Jesus goes on, but you've neglected the more important matters of the law, the stuff we talked about yesterday, the Micah 6:8 stuff, justice, mercy, faithfulness, stuff that is also referenced in Hosea, which comes up, I think, twice earlier on in the book of Matthew, definitely in Matthew 9. And then I'm going to cheat and use my marginal notes here to figure out where else it is. Matthew 9, here it is, 12. This is when Jesus pardons Matthew and invites him to come and be a part. And Matthew throws the party and the bad people show up and the Pharisees are like, why do I have bad people here? And on hearing this, Jesus said, it's not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. But go and learn what this means. I desire mercy, not sacrifice. For I haven't come to call the righteous, but sinners. That's a reference to Hosea 6:6. And the cross-references in the margins are not going to bail me out. It's around here somewhere. Wait, let's just do this thing. The honest time, we're not going to cut anything here. This is how long it actually takes for me to make these connections, because none of us know this thing inside and out. You don't have to get how it all works. It's okay if you have to look around a little bit. I'm stalling. Found it. Matthew 12. I should have been able to get this because it fits in with this story. Oh, well, no shame. Now you heard how it actually works. Matthew 12. This is where the disciples are picking grain in the grain fields, one of the Sabbath controversies, and they're mad at him because the disciples are doing what's unlawful on the Sabbath. And Jesus answered, haven't you read what David did when he and his companions were hungry? He entered the house of God, and he and his companions ate the consecrated bread, which was not lawful for them to do, but only for the priests. Or haven't you read in the law that on the Sabbath the priests in the temple desecrate the day and yet are innocent? I tell you that one greater than the temple is here. If you had known what these words mean, quote, I desire mercy, not sacrifice, you would not have condemned the innocent, for the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath. I probably gave you more context there than you needed, but it's a second reference to Hosea 6:6. And in terms of principle and ideas, it really is a reference to Micah 6:8 as well, which is the whole thing about do justice, love mercy, walk humbly with your God, which is everything we talked about yesterday. Hey, this is Matt from the future, interrupting Matt, who was recording that episode of the podcast just now, a few minutes ago. I just got going, and you'll see as we get into the second half of this conversation that I kind of wanted to game this particular passage out at the level of where I'm at and the stuff that I'm thinking about and wrestling with and the journey of faith that I'm on myself. It just felt like we needed to cut the thing in half so that we could give both the examination portion of this conversation as well as, I suppose, the more existential heart level discussion here, which we don't always get to, but this time around we do. I wanted to just give both of those things room to breathe. So we're going to cut it in half right there, and we'll pick it up right where we left off tomorrow and round out this line of thought. All right, I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast. Let's do this again soon.